Hi there, welcome to the fifth video in our Writing Center series. Today we're going to talk about all the writing paper that will be best for your students at your writing centers. And if you've missed any of the other Writing Center setup videos, you can find the playlist in the description of this video. My name is Rachel Hull. I'd like to thank you for joining me today as we talk about ways to make your writing center an effective place for your students to become authors. And today we're going to talk about the kinds of writing paper that you can offer your students. Because if you've ever given your students a full-size piece of writing paper and not gotten anything back but anxiety from your students, you'll know that it's important to use the right kind of paper, the right shape, the right kind of lines. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Because your students are not one size fits all, and so your writing paper shouldn't be either. So the first thing to look at is how the different sizes and types of writing paper can help differentiate your writing activities. And if you give all your students the same independent writing activities, it's going to be rough. They might cry, you might cry, so just don't do it. Instead, you're going to want to offer options like half-size paper. It's not so overwhelming as a full-size piece of paper, and they won't think they have to fill up the whole page. Or offer different kinds of lined paper. It's perfectly acceptable to offer your students blank paper, primary lined paper, regular lined paper, whatever you think that they're ready for. Blank paper is great for the beginning of the school year. You don't need to multitask and teach writing and handwriting at the same time. So let's not try to do that. You want to make sure that you offer them something that they can feel comfortable writing on. I usually add blank paper only at the beginning of the year, and then I keep that there for a month, maybe a month and a half, and then I'll slowly start adding primary lined paper. But it's important to, even if you're adding some different lines or different sizes, don't take any away if your students still need it. If you know you still have students who aren't ready to use the lined paper, keep blank paper for them. And then as the year goes by, you can see if you don't need it anymore, you can remove it. But then also at the end of the year, you can add regular lined paper and keep primary lined paper as well. So it's all about adding what each of your students needs. Make sure to leave room for a picture. Part of learning to write is illustrating and publishing your finished pieces. It's really an important step of becoming an author, but it also helps younger students express their thoughts that they may not be able to do with words or, in their sentences. For example, if they're writing about a time that they felt sad, they might not be able to express that in words yet, but they can definitely draw a picture and express that with maybe a frowning face on their picture as they illustrate it. So it's really important to leave room for a picture because you're going to see more meaning from their pictures, not just their words. Now, usually I have paper that is half line and half room for a picture. When your students are ready and they run out of lines, then you can give them a full lined piece of paper, either the primary lines or the regular lined paper, and then give them a separate piece of paper so they can illustrate and, staple it together, and then you have a booklet. Now let's talk about versatility. Your writing center can be versatile enough to mix things up. By changing your paper often, it won't become stale for your students because even the most engaging activities will start getting a little old for your kiddos. So here's how to change things up. You can use Astro Bright papers because writing on fun, bright papers is a treat for your students. It may not seem like it, but they're going to be excited to go and do that if you offer that to them every once in a while. For example, if you have fall activities, use yellow or orange paper and they can write fall poems or fall stories or fall letters to each other. Or if you're writing about snow in winter, use the light blue Astro Brights paper, and that's a nice, cool color to use for winter. I like to give my students a sheet of stickers to use too to illustrate their writing. As teachers, we collect them. They come in things. You collect a lot of stickers. You've got a lot of stickers, and I love giving my students the stickers because they're so proud to add them to their finished pieces. You can also provide paper with seasonal borders for your students to publish their writing. And it's more fun to write about, for example, Earth Day, if your students have an Earth Day page with globes around there that they can color. At literacy stations, we have free sets of all seasonal paper all ready for you to go, download and print, and they're great to add more interest to your writing center, so you can check those out. I like to pre-make booklets for my students so they could write books instead of just on a paper. Sometimes it's easier for them to write on each small page rather than try to formulate all their thoughts on one big piece of paper. If you have parent volunteers, a great idea to make these is to give them a Dunkin' Donuts gift card and a ream of cheap writing paper. I think the one I used, I got at Walmart for less than $5. You don't need the heavy stuff. Just get the cheapest ream of paper that you can. Give your parent volunteers a paper cutter and a stapler, and they can cut the paper and staple them into whatever size booklets you want. I like to have both the quarter size paper, so they cut it in fours and just staple it, or a half size piece of paper too, so that way if students want to make a bigger booklet, they can. Now, if you don't have a parent helper, I've done this while binge watching The Crown on Netflix. That works. I also have had, my kiddos are older at home too, so I usually find a way to make it worth their while. I'm not above bribing my own children to make some booklets for me too. So it's not hard to make. And honestly, once you make a lot of them, not every student will use them every time at your writing center. So if you make them out of one ream of paper, you'll have plenty to last you for a really long time. The thing I love about writing centers is how many engaging activities you can add to help your students practice different writing genres. So we're talking about letter writing, expository how-to, they can write menus, recipes, list making, informational posters, that sort of thing. So all the types of writing that isn't just a narrative that you want your students to do, you can add to your writing center too. Now, your kiddos are still young, so they're going to need templates for you. It's more important right now that they learn what goes into a letter and how to write a letter, rather than have them know when to indent and where to put the closing thing. So you're going to want to make a template for them. And so I have a lot of these already at literacy stations. You can check those out, but it's important that you give them that opportunity because it's not about formatting. They're going to have plenty of practice to do that later. Right now, we just want them to fall in love with the writing, just a lot of different ways. And so we're going to give them templates to help them. Now, the best way for your students to practice writing is with a pencil and a piece of paper, of course, but that doesn't mean you can't conserve paper. We're talking about a lot of copies here, and if you're thinking, that's a lot of paper to copy, I've got some helpful hints to help you conserve the amount of copies that you're going to make. My first hint is save your oops copies. I don't know how many times I photocopied a whole class set of things only to get them back to my classroom and realize there's a mistake on like question number 5 or something like that. So instead of just throwing them away or recycling, I will draw a big X on the back on the mistake side with a Sharpie, and then I will copy my writing center papers on the back of that. And with a quick conversation with my students about how, I like to save paper too. Here is your writing activity. You'll see this is on the back. I made a big mistake. I didn't want to throw it away. I wanted to save paper, so this is the side you'll do. It's never been a problem. They gladly just do that side and ignore the oops side. I use dry erase boards a lot, especially for spelling and math. Once I realized I could do more of a making words or, any kind of phonemic awareness like, substitution, they can just erase the letter and put it in there, or we could use magnet letters. And a lot of spelling activities I found are better without pencil and paper. They can use dry erase markers or magnet letters. And so I made a lot less copies for spelling. So what I realized was the 2-3 class sets of paper that I used for spelling, I could then use dry erase boards for those and fill them in with my writing center paper instead. So I was not using more paper. I was using the same amount of paper. So take a moment to think about the different types of writing paper at your writing center. How can you adapt all of the papers that you have? Can you add space for a picture? Do you have paper with all kinds of lines and borders for your kiddos? Because once you'll find that when you provide your different variations of writing paper to your students, you're going to see some budding authors at your writing center. And I'll see you in the next video where we talk about writing center rules and routines that you're going to want to practice with your students. So I'll see you then.